There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and to another episode of Zooming In. News. I keep saying new. It's not that new anymore. An occasional series. It's not that occasional. It's twice a week, where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to chat about articles that are published online about the readerly lifestyle or about literature and or writers. And I would like to welcome back for her second appearance by popular demand. Oh my God, she made quite a splash when she teamed up with me last time. Elisabeth of the fabulous BookTube channel, Bokens and Books, joining us from Ottawa. Welcome back, Elisabeth.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
We are here to discuss an article from this really interesting website. It's called Tor.com, and it has these kind of bookish lifestyle columns on a regular basis. But it's actually a publishing company that publishes science fiction and fantasy novels, which is not my jam at all. But boy, they sure have good content for this series. And the article is called Beyond Guilty Pleasures, When Reading is Weird or Hard or Personal by Molly Templeton. And it was published on September 21st. And what an interesting article it is. How are we going to get this started, Elisabeth? What did you make of it?
I thought it hit a particular nerve with me because before I started my BookTube channel, it was a question I asked myself, am I going to talk about everything that I read? Because there are some things I'm not sure if I want to put out publicly. And I don't know if it was a question of snobbery or a question of perhaps internal, I'm not going to say shame, but something with which I'm not quite comfortable with myself and putting out in the public. So I thought it was interesting. The idea that there are right books to read and wrong books to read.
And what books did you worry about talking about on your channel? It's just you and me here, so it's private conversation.
Well, at first it was the genre books like romance or mysteries or books that are considered not as good sometimes as literature or serious nonfiction or things like that. And the more I watched BookTube, the more I realized it doesn't matter. It's just some sort of snobbery that we get out of school, I guess, or out of somewhere else, that some books are better than others. So I managed to deal with that. But when I was younger, I had a streak of reading royal gossip. Anything I could read about the Princess of Wales, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of York and their divorces and the ugly fights and all of that. I loved to read that. And then I stopped for a long time because I guess they became a bit more behaved. And now they've started again. There's tons to read about the royal family, royal gossip. And I don't talk about it much on my channel, even though I've read quite a few books.
Do you know that I am a big aficionado of royal biographies and so on?
Yeah. So I'm currently listening to a biography of Queen Mary, and I thought of you when I started listening to it.
Oh, which one? Who's the author?
Matriarch by Anne Edwards.
Excellent. It's the first one I read. I've read two more since then. Oh, I'm such a nerd. So I'll have recommendations for you. If you like this, try that type of recommendations later on. But yes, and so that is exactly what I was going to say, that I'm a little self-conscious about talking. People are getting so uptight about the monarchy, whether it's how much money it costs and stuff. And I'm open to those arguments. I think they should scale down. They should sell one of their big palaces and give the money to the homeless. That would be a great gesture. But for the most part, for me, they're kind of my own, and it is private, my own private mythology. Since I was about 11 years old, I've been interested in all the royals from about Queen Victoria to the present, and I still am. But I also got away from it around the time of Chuck and Di's wedding. Everybody was interested in royalty, and that I don't like being interested in something that a whole bunch of other people are interested in. So I just kind of left it behind for maybe 20 years, but I've gotten back into it.
Yeah.
So that is one of mine. And I don't not talk about it, but I sometimes I give a really short review because I know certain people are morally outraged. But I have done standalone. I did a standalone review of one of the Queen Mary biographies, and it got, good response. But I'm sure from the 17 people that watched it. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's one thing to read biographies of people who are dead, who were part of history. So in my mind, that's kind of okay. We're reading about history, but I'm thinking of the people who are living now. I guess the more books we read about them, like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's, or Prince William's and his wife Kate Middleton.
The title is Beyond Guilty Pleasures. And would you count your self-consciousness about reading royal biographies as being a guilty pleasure, or does it fit into one of these other categories, weird, hard, or personal?
For me, it would be guilty pleasures because I really feel guilty about it. Because I know it's impacting people's lives. I'm treating these celebrities as soap operas, and that's not nice. I don't feel good about it. So in a way, I guess it's personal too. I don't feel good about it. It's some sort of part of me that I'm not the proudest of.
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of you. There's the cutoff for royalty talk in this video. So the other categories are when reading is weird or hard or personal. And she distinguishes that from guilty. She says about weird things that she feels weird talking about. Self-conscious, squirmy, and I'm not sure that I buy the distinction because it sounds pretty much like a guilty pleasure. Like she talks about a friend reading historical smut, and I think that would be kind of a guilty pleasure if you like it. Why not? But that she keeps that on a private list. She doesn't put it on Goodreads.
Yeah.
So what kind of smut do you withhold from all of us, Elisabeth?
Well, I suppose the same historical smut. I like a good romance, a good bodice ripper once in a while. The thing is, I don't have much to say about them, so I cannot really make a book review of them. They're entertaining. I read them. They're fun. And then I have nothing else to say about them. So that's why I don't necessarily talk about them. It's not necessarily out of guilt.
Fair enough. And I don't read that kind of stuff because I'm a big snob, but that's fine. That's a good example. What people feel weird about in terms of their reading choices is very subjective. It would vary widely from person to person.
Yes.
So this author gave an example of having read and reread Wicked by Gregory Maguire, which I thought was one of the worst novels I've ever read, but she loved it and she read it. She's like some people that watch their favorite movie 20 times. And she rereads that book and she feels a little bit weird about the fact that she's doing so she doesn't broadcast it. Do you have anything like that?
I don't think so. When I was younger, I read and reread and reread Anne of Green Gables pretty much every year, the entire series. But there's nothing weird about that. It was just a book that I loved, and I took the habit of reading it every summer. It sort of started my summer.
I think it's kind of a prerequisite to renewing one's passport in Canada, is it not?
Probably. It's a proof of citizenship.
The other thing she talks about is self-help. And I have to admit, I don't read self-help. I have a lot of judgment about self-help, but self-help was a great help to me back in the day, 20, 30 years ago. But now I'm embarrassed. I would be embarrassed to read a self-help book or to have it on Goodreads. And that's kind of silly, maybe. You read about you and self-help.
I cannot say that I read a lot of self-help. I guess I would tend more to Google something if I needed help of that kind, because the few self-help books that I've read, I thought that just a single blog post would have been enough to give the idea of the entire book. It tends to be overly long for the little useful idea that there's in it. So I don't dwell a lot in the self-help.
That is the case for too much nonfiction. And then she she kind of veers off into writing manuals, books that teach you how to write. And she's a writer wannabe, although she's a very fine writer. And she's embarrassed at how many of them she gobbles up. And I have to say that I related to that. I relate to that 150% because I had them all. I bought them all of them. And I read maybe 3 of them. And I never started writing. This is back in the 2000s, early 2000s, even 90s, 2000s, 2010s, somewhere in the 2010s. I think I divested myself of all of them because it was like, Shawn, it's shit or get off the pot, get rid of these books. So they're gone.
Yeah. No, I read quite a few of those too. Yeah, I guess I wanted to be a writer and I read the books, but then I figured out that reading the books will not make me a writer. I just have to sit and write, and I haven't done that a single time in my life. So it's not true. I've
I
tried a few times, but
In the last couple of years, I'm seeing that people are still using the artist way, and that's the one that I did use quite
Mhm.
devotedly for a couple of years, maybe. And it didn't get me to start writing anything other than morning pages, and I'm not going to read those to you anytime soon. But it's kind of making a comeback. Like I never heard about the artist way for a long time, and now some bookkeepers are doing it, and podcasts. I hear people doing it.
Mhm.
I have to say that I'm cynical, and I'm going to say I'm going to reveal quite a lot about myself in this statement, but I would like to see a list of best-selling, revered, well-respected writers who got their start from the artist way. I haven't heard of one.
Good point. Good
Or
point.
from any of the other manuals, to be honest. But that one in particular, like a Booker Prize winner, or it doesn't have to be that highbrow. Any bookish award, romance novel award winner making a speech and thanking the artist way. I've never heard of that. And if you watching this can give me an example, please put it in the comments, and I will retract my snarky remark.
A type of books that I generally put in that category of squirmy, not quite comfortable reading is true crime. Sometimes I wonder, why am I interested? Not that I read a ton of them, I read perhaps 1, 2 a year, but why am I interested in murders or in theft or crime like this? I don't know. Again, it sort of tickles a part of my brain that is the one that I'm not the most proud of.
Well, when you get convicted of murder and you make your public statement after the conviction and you credit all the true crime that you read, I will have a new respect for the genre, Elisabeth.
Indeed. It's thank you to all the books about Jack the Ripper.
That's right. Mine is stuff about gay sexuality, and I don't read this kind of, and I don't mean smut, but I mean nonfiction books that are more kind of like self-helpy or social social and or literary criticism that explores gay sexuality on various levels. And there was one of the first ones that I read, and this was in the early 90s, and I was living in Toronto, and I was a legal secretary on the 34th floor of one of the most elite towers, and there was a really, and I was, how old would I would have been 28 or 9, and there was a really hot articling student that he was a reader, and I was reading a book called Sex Between Men by Douglas Sadownik, and on the dust jacket it had two naked, or maybe they're wearing speedos, but embracing, and I had very purposely left the dust jacket at home so that I just had a kind of a bare hardback like this. But I got onto the elevator with him, and it was just us two, and he said, "What are you reading?" And I just froze. It was like, because he didn't know I was gay. And I said, "Oh, if I showed you, it would just embarrass you. So let's talk about something else." I have trotted out that anecdote several times on my channel, so there it is again.
You reminded me of a time when I was reading at work. It was my student job. I was a customs officer on the border between Canada and the US. And according to the collective agreement, when there was no cars or nobody at the border, we were on a break and we could do whatever we wanted. Well, we had to be there. So I read books. And I was the only one who was doing that. I was the only reader there. And at some point, I became self-conscious because I thought the books that I was reading were too nerdy for my coworkers. So I was hiding the cover of Anna Karenina, and I was hiding the covers of Crime and Punishment because I felt self-conscious about reading that in front of my colleagues who were not readers at all for most of them.
Well, I can understand that, and I'm glad you found your people amongst us here on BookTube, Elisabeth. Well, this has been a guilt-free pleasure to discuss this topic with you, Elisabeth. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.